And without further delay, as we have already mentioned that Ladakh Science Camp will be a blend of online technical sessions and field visits, and I would like to begin the series of online lectures. I would like to invite Dr. Tsering Stobdan to speak on the topic DNA study revealing the genetic history of Ladakh. Dr. Tsering Stobdan is a scientist in the Department of Pediatrics, University of California, San Diego, USA. He is from Sheh, Leh, Ladakh. He did his schooling from Ladakh, BSc in Zoology from Hansraj College, Delhi, MSc in Biomedical Science from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Center for Biomedical Research, Delhi, Ph.D. in Biotechnology from Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, CSIR, Delhi, postdoctoral research fellow from Department of Medicine, Cell and Developmental Biology, Vanderbilt University, USA. Presently, he is a project scientist in Department of Pediatrics, University of California, San Diego, USA. Dr. Singh Stobdan, please.
Thank you, Tandula. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
So, thank you so much for the nice introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me, Tashile. And it's always a pleasure to talk in front of the home crowd, especially topics that are really exciting and very close to my heart. And I'm also thankful for the organizer, Chairman Kats Samangal, and then Director Ladakh Science Foundation, and then my old and childhood friend Kadawa and other dignitaries. And also I would like to thank the audience, especially my young friends, to joining me for this first technical session. So without wasting much time, I will quickly go into the details. So I'll be talking on the DNA study revealing the genetic history of Ladakh. So although I'm not presently working on this particular topic, but this is something I did during my PhD, and later on I did updated myself, bringing all kind of literature and reading all sort of latest development. I will talk about my current research project just on one slide at the end, which might excite you, some of you, and maybe of some of your interest. And then the other thing was that I'm working here on both human, mouse, flies, and cells. So I use all kind of models, including the computer model system. So anyone who would like to know more about what I do, especially if you have particular questions on mouse genetics or fly genetics, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to share my knowledge. So without delaying much time, I'll go through the more important points that I'll be talking. So I'm not sure what the audience here. I'm pretty. I have a broad idea that some of you are from the engineering background. Maybe they don't have a good background of what the DNA, although maybe the cell to the DNA level, but some further details of DNA, and then how the DNA can tell a history. That's more interesting. And then I will jump directly onto the genetic history of Ladakh, and then finally the topic that I am working here at UCSD, University of California, San Diego, is on high altitude adaptation in humans. So basically I look for populations all over the world living at high altitude. That includes Kyrgyz, Ethiopian, Indian populations, and Tibetans also to some extent. So just quickly going through what the DNA is, it's if you draw a blood, it contains thousands of cells, and then within the cells you have the nucleus, and within the nucleus you have the 22 plus X and Y chromosome. And if you entangle the chromosome, it finally reach up to 3.2 billion base pairs. So just to give you a visual perspective, so you can see this is a whole shelf of book, printed with 3.2 billion genetic codes. So this is in one cells of one individual. Imagine there are 10 trillion cells in human body. Each cell has this much of knowledge in it. So it has been passed from generation to generation with all the changes that is going through the evolutions. And there are some disease related, there are some phenotypic characteristics. So everything is coded in the DNA. So, the main question that arises is what makes us different. So this is more relevant to what we are talking today in terms of the history, because why we are different from rest of the world population. So just to give you a quick introduction, these are the single genetic variants that is called single nucleotide polymorphism. So what you see here is three individuals, mother, father, and son. So at all other places, they will have the same genetic code, but on the highlighted part, you could see that the progeny, the son is carrying the nucleotide that is from one of the parents. So here you could see mostly from the father side, some from the mother side. So that's how the recombination is taking place at the DNA level, and then how the baby is formed. So that makes us quite unique from rest of the world populations, even rest of the individual around the world. So then coming to the human origin and ancestry, because this is quite relevant to the history of Ladakh also, and why it is important, because we always, as a human, we always try to explore where we come from, where we are heading to, whether it is space research, whether it is archaeology, whether it is physics, everything we are trying to look for where we are originally coming from, whether you believe in Big Bang theory, whether you believe in a particular religion, everyone is concerned about identity and future and past. So especially in US, this ancestry is really a very hot topic, because as you know, if you read history, United States is all made of immigrants. They have come from all over the world and have settled here, and that they've made this country as their home. But the sad story about these people is that they always crave for their roots. They don't know where they have come from, especially the African Americans, those who were bought here as a slave. They were bonded laborers, bought on purchased in a slave market and sold in the U.S. market. So they don't even know where their uh, father were from. So because even during the uh, apartheid periods, there were a lot of segregation and all those things. I will not go into the details, but there's a huge market about ancestry. You might have heard about the ancestry.com, where you can get the information. So I'm just giving you here an example. So this I just copied from the website itself. It says that this particular girl has 46% of Mali ancestry, 23% of Ireland, and 21% of England. So this is what the genetic is telling us. So the extent, the relief they get, is the satisfaction they get out of these results is immense, because they have some answer to their past now. I mean, they could tell where they have come from. So this is such a breathtaking as well as a breakthrough in terms of the research and its direct application to the well-being of the populations. The other aspects of the ancestry is that it has a lot of application in the forensic science, where a lot of crime which were not solved until like 20-25 years has been solved through forensic DNA. And then finally, there's a future concept of personalized medicine, and that is quite relevant to Ladakh also. The reason I would like to bring here Ladakh specifically is because most of the research on genomics is carried out on the European populations, or whatever the major global populations are. So there may be a drug that is very specific to the European populations, and we always end up taking those drugs, but that might have an adverse effect on us, and we don't know. But if we don't have a genetic information in hand in future, that could probably be a very unfortunate part if we don't have a data bank of the genetic makeup of the Ladakhi population in general or specific ethnic group within the Ladakh itself. So in future, it's going to be a very big resource for our own benefit as well as for the benefits of the humankind. So just to quickly go through what the ancestry, how the ancestry is read through the DNA, you have three methods. One is the Y chromosome, and the other one is the mitochondrial DNA, and the third one is the autosomal DNA. So the most common and most simple way that these company, the ancestry DNA, they use is the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA. So Y chromosome, as some of you may know, it's the one that makes a man, because only a male carry a Y chromosome, and then you can easily trace the Y chromosome to the up to the Adams. And then if you look at the female, it's the maternal mother sides, the mitochondrial DNA that is present in the egg. So you can trace back up to the Eve. That is the term that evolutionary anthropology are using, because they could trace back to these Y chromosome to the person from all the humans that we have today in the world have the Y chromosome derived from. Similarly, the mitochondrial DNA. And then the third aspect is the autosomal DNA. So autosomal DNA is very intensive, and it has, like, as I mentioned, around 3 billion base pair, and out of which there are 10 million variants between two individuals. So even if I compare with my sister or my brother, I will have uh, millions of variations just between us. So autosomal tracking autosomal ancestry is a very labor intensive, and you need a lot of computational work. So this is not a common way of doing it, but when you are looking into the evolution of the human itself, like you're comparing the Homo sapiens with the Neanderthal, Denisovans, so you need to analyze the autosomal DNA as well. So all these three type tools are equally important in terms of knowing the history of the humankind. So just to give you a quick examples, you have, I just kept three examples here. You have one haplogroup. Maybe you can consider this haplogroup 1 as one populations, number 2 as second population, and number 3 as third populations. And they have a combination of these AGTC. And the way you do is that you use, this is a standing population. Suppose you are analyzing three populations. Then using different combinations and comparing with other populations like Africans, like Europeans, Asians, Native American, Japanese, Chinese. So you make a tree, and then you could make out where these population has come from. So as I've shown here, like there is a mutation at the T, and that has changed to C here in the haplogroup 3. So that's why now the present population in haplogroup 3 has a C instead of T. So that's how you finally trace back to the common ancestor, which could be a chimpanzee or a early human being. So that's how the ancestry is measured or calculated. So based on this, the most accepted theory at present is out of Africa theory. It started more than, although it is mentioned here 55,000 years ago, but there are more evidence that have come recently which trace back to almost more than 160,000 years back into past. So you can easily see the importance of studying the DNA and its application in terms of knowing the history, because when we read our history, we don't have any traces beyond the Indus Valley or the Harappan civilization, but this is like lakhs of years before even the Harappa civilization started. So it is way more, informative, as well as it's more uh, more vast in terms of the knowledge that you can get, because you can easily correlate your own self to a chimpanzee by comparing the genomes. So coming directly to the Ladakhi, that's what I try to gather all these slides. Uh, First, I'll go through the present ethnic distribution of Ladakh. So this ethnic distribution is based on the language that is spoken, because as you know, that language tells a tale, right? Because a language is something you can always find the roots, trace back to its origin also. So based on ethno-linguistic uh, database, I found out that these languages like Balti, Changtang, it's called Changskat, Ladakhi, Purki, and Zanskari, they all have the Western and all trace back to Tibeto-Burman and Sino-Tibetan language. On the other hand, the Indo-European language has the Dardic, Shina, and then comes the Brokskat. I think this is the language from the Dahanu, and then you have Shina and Sheena and Sheena. I think it's spoken in Kargil, some part of Dras area. So you could see how this is well characterized and well distributed in Ladakh. And the other thing that you could also appreciate from this slide is that how uh, uh, how diverse the population of Ladakh is, because you have two major civilization confluencing in Ladakh. One is from the western side, that is Indo-European, and then from the eastern, it's the Sino-Tibetan. So I took two of the studies that were done on Ladakhi population, one from the Y chromosome study, other one from the mitochondrial. So in a way, you will get the history from our father side and the history from our mother side. And then I will present some of my own results that I did during my PhD, which kind of explore you through the whole autosomal DNA. So this is a study they did using around 37 population worldwide, and they have put Ladakhi as one of the populations. And their main aim was to see what kind of genetic architecture the Ladakhi population is made of. So the way they do is they use the different, like I showed you before, there are different nucleotide variants, that is called single nucleotide polymorphisms at certain location in the genomic DNA. So they actually detected what kind of mutations are there in certain individuals. So this study has, I think, around 200 Ladakhi individuals, all males, because it's a Y chromosome study. And then they have also included data from all the rest of the populations. So the plot that you see here is called a principal component analysis. It shows you the spatial distributions of the population based on the genetic data. It actually tries to plot different axis, because you cannot plot beyond the X, Y, and Z axis. So this actually normalize for this, and then you can have principal axis 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. But this is the best principal component 1 and 2 gives you the best picture of the spatial distributions. So it's really amazing when you see Ladakhi population all alone standing in the middle. And that is exactly what we see in our geographical map also, because it constitutes the confluence of East and West civilizations. And as the study specifically mentioned, that the Ladakhi population has four major haplogroups. So I did showed you what the haplogroup is here. Like these are like if you have population 1 that is representing haplogroup 1, population 2 representing haplogroup 2, and likewise. So Ladakhi population has haplogroup D, R, O, and H, all almost in equal proportion. That means that if you pick 100 individuals, 32% will have haplogroup D. So if you compare the D haplogroup here on the side plots that you see, the D1 is mostly prevalent in the Tibetan Plateau and the East Asian part on the top right side, haplogroup D. And then you also see haplogroup R, which is mostly on the West and Central Asia and Pakistan and Punjab and plain areas. And likewise, you also have haplogroup O, which is on the Southeast Asian sides. And then you have haplogroup H, which is on the southern India and some of the Ganges Plateau, Ganges Delta. So it's amazing that Ladakhi has all these all these haplogroup in almost equal proportions. So that shows how diverse the genetic architecture of Ladakh is. And then coming to the mitochondrial DNA, this is from the mother side. So again, they have picked all different world population, which constitutes of New World that includes the North American. This is the Native American populations, then European, West Asia, Africa, Central Asia, South Asia, Oceania, Australia, and Far East Asia. So again, the haplogroup is based on how much percentage frequency of the haplogroup is present in one population. If you could see the table here, West Asia has haplogroup number 4, almost maximum, which is 67%. Likewise, the New World, which is Native American, has 59%, as well as 35 in South Asia, and then you have Europe and Africa. So this is how these haplogroups are representative of different world populations. And if you look at this branched structure, this is each circle or each label is one female individual from Ladakh. And although they do have characterized these based on the religious identity. So the red ones are Buddhist populations and the blue ones are the Muslim populations from Ladakh. And the good thing that you see is that, again, you have all the ethnic haplogroups from different part of the world, like haplogroup 1 that you see here, it's coming from the West Asia. And similarly, haplogroup 5, if you see, it's coming from the Southeast Asia and Oceania. So again, from the mother side, you have all mixed up populations. And then finally, if you look at the history, it also correlates with the historical events that we know because it was one of the part of the Silk Route. So you could obviously guess that the Indo-Aryan occupations during the Neolithic age, that we know their settlement in the Harappan and Indus Valley areas, and then the Silk Road, which we were part of, and then you have historic connection with the Tibet. So everything explained very nicely based on our genetic studies. And this is something that I did during my PhD. So all the CSIR labs were involved in this. This is the Human Genome Variation Consortium projects that we did. And I was working, collecting samples from Ladakh, and other people from other lab have contributed samples from all over India. And these are specifically the tribal population, because the idea was that we will have unique genetic architecture in these tribal populations, and that could be exploited or used as a resource for identifying new genetic marker, disease marker, or even for what do you call the pharmacological purposes, because certain genetic variants are indicators of certain disease markers and all those things. So again, you could see here that you can see TB1 is from, and TB1 SP2 at this corner are one from Leh area, the other ones from Changtang area, and we had samples from Spiti, and then the color code is again the group 1, 2, and 3 and 4, and these are nicely distributed based on the ethnicity, because you have all these Tibeto-Burman populations, mostly Asian populations. Broadly, we describe them as the Asian populations. So you see that the if you look at the pink color, the Manipuri populations as well as the Ladakhi population, because we have certain genetic roots based on our physical features. So they do reveal from the genetic studies. And if we look at the population tree here on the right, you could see the populations out of all the Indian populations. The Tibeto-Burman population, like SP2, which is from Changtang area, is closest to Chinese and Japanese populations. And the black four population that is shown here are the four major populations for which the data were already available that time. These are African, European, Chinese, and Japanese populations. So this is not part of our project, but it was done as part of HapMap projects that is done by the international group. We use their data to compare where our own population stands. So I'll quickly go through the last part because I'm sure we have time also limited. So this is the part that I'm working on. This is high altitude adaptations. The reason I'm covering this with the Ladakhi history is because it has so many things to tell us. So when you go to high altitude, you face all kind of problems. Only hypoxia cannot be protected because you cannot carry oxygen all over the place. Cold, you can wear clothes. Dehydration, you can wear tea or water or whatever. Solar radiation, you can wear goggles or clothes. But hypoxia or low oxygen, there is no treatment. So you have to take oxygen. And our ancestor, they will not have any oxygen. So obviously they might have gone through the selection pressure at the genetic level. So just to give you a quick introductions, how we react to high altitude, not all Ladakhi, but mostly the people from low altitude. So when you are at high altitude and when you spin your blood, this is the red part, and this is called the red blood cells, and the percentage is called the hematocrits. So after you spend some time at high altitude, your red blood cell count increases, so you could see an increase in the hematocrit. But we Ladakhi, as being an adapted population, we tend to have the hematocrit very close to the population living at low altitude. But there are other population, even in Ladakh also, who suffer from chronic mountain sickness, and they have a huge number of RBC, and then the only treatment they could get is phlebotomy, where they have to draw blood, take out blood, excess blood, so that their blood is thinner and they don't get any stroke or heart attack or anything. So the reason we could believe that genetic adaptation in Ladakhi population is real is that we have a history of high altitude occupation based on recent studies, especially looking at our close proximity to the Tibetan plateau and the Tibetan populations, 160 to 150,000 years old. So the reason genetic adaptation can take place at this time period is because there are examples where you have lactose tolerance 10,000 years, pigmentation of the skin 7,000 years, malaria where you have sickle cells just 2,000 years. So if these phenotype can have the genetic adaptation, we are living, not we, our ancestors have been living at altitude for more than 150,000 years, and there is definitely a genetic adaptation that has taken place. And because there are other way we could protect, because malaria you can always escape from the mosquitoes, but low oxygen there's no way you can escape, so there's always a selection pressure. So how the DNA selection works, if you could see on the right, on the left side, there are this is an example. You have a UV photons, it leads to a certain mutations, DNA break. So that's why when you go to high altitude, you have high rate of skin cancer. That's because ultraviolet it leads to DNA breakage, and then it ends up in having weird combinations of DNA that leads to cancer, skin cancer specifically. And I'm not sure, that may be one of the reason we have high prevalence of cancer in Ladakh, but that's not the topic here. But definitely the evolutionary adaptation to low oxygen is really something that is taking place in the whole Tibetan plateau. So just to give you an example, before selection, you see a blue red dot here, red box here. So this is, if you think one of our ancestors thousands and thousands of years back may have a change in their genetic makeup which make that particular individual more tolerant to low oxygen. Now, because he could tolerate better than rest of the population, over the period of time, this benefit allele will spread in the population, and eventually it reaches to the fixation, and then all the population in that, all the individual in that population will have this particular beneficial alleles. So that's what the recent studies have shown. So this is a really interesting study because I'll come back to what Denisovan means. I did spoke about this in my previous lecture on Ladakh Science Foundation, but I'll quickly go through this. So this is one of the study where they have compared Tibetan with the Han Chinese population, and each black line that you see is you can call it as a DNA variation marker. In the black dot you see here on top, in Han Chinese it is not there, but in majority of Tibetan population it is there. When they when these scientists, they sequence the whole this particular gene which is involved in low oxygen adaptation, they found that the genetic variants that the Tibetan population has, they could not find these variation in any of the existing populations. Then when they compare this with one of the extinct human, not the human, archaic human populations, they were really shocked to see that this variation in the Tibetan exactly matches with the Denisovan populations. And then from this study, they concluded that this particular stretch of DNA that Tibetan population have inherited is coming directly from this Denisovan. So, who were Denisovans? So, Denisovan was one of the ancient humans, not from the Homo sapiens that we are coming from, but this is some other humans that went into extinction. And then we also know about the Neanderthal that existed like 450,000 years. When I started my PhD, people, they won't believe that there was an intermixing of these Homo sapiens with other humans. But right now, there are a lot of studies. They have found even a baby fossils in a cave in Europe where the half of the DNA was from Neanderthal and half was from Denisovans. So there is clear evidence that the present population has so many genetic relics from these extinct populations. And blue color eye is one of the features that is known from the Neanderthal. Similarly, the Denisovan have given us the genetic variants that make us adapted to low oxygen. So this is what the different extinct ancient humans, and the one that I was talking was the Neanderthal and Homo sapiens, and the one that you see on the extreme bottom right side is our ancestor, which is Homo sapiens. And definitely, we although don't look like this, but this is where we came from. It's actually that's why we believe in out of Africa theory. So the evidence, subsequently, more evidence came, and one of the strongest evidence was a study that was published in Nature, where they have found a jaw bone from one of the cave in Tibet. It's a Labrang monastery, and they thought it's some relics, and they used to pray. And then so later on, when the Chinese government or the scientists, they took it for analysis. They found that this is one of the Joe born from the Denisovan population. So you could figure out that there were humans living at this altitude for more than 150,000 years. So definitely, we also have some portion of that part. So this is something was my project when I was doing my PhD based on the Ladakhi populations. So what we found is that this is EGLN1. This is another gene that is involved in low oxygen tolerance. So when you have certain variants of this particular genes, you are less susceptible to high altitude diseases. So what we found is that at this particular position, you have the T allele. So this has either T or A. So the population living at high altitude tend to possess A more than T. So here in the plot, you could see the altitude wise and the percentage of T alleles. So this is something really interesting that we found, and it was subsequently published also in the proceedings of National Academy of Science. And this is what I'm doing right now. It's basically chronic mountain sickness. We also have these disease in Hanle and Korzok area specifically. And apart from Dr. Norbu, he is one of the leading person in this field, and he has been really working hard in terms of how he could explore and how he could gain more knowledge and how this can be benefited for other people, other population around the world. Because chronic mountain sickness is something that can teach other population having stroke, having heart attack, and all those things. So this is my last slides. This is just to give you what I'm doing right now. So our lab right now is mostly focused on pluripotent stem cells. What we do here is that we collect skin samples from different populations. We have skin samples from South American populations. What we do is that we reprogram these skin cells into nerve cells like brain cells, because you cannot go and ask someone to donate a part of their brain, right? You cannot go and ask someone to donate a part of their heart muscles. So the only way you could grow these cells is to reprogram. The way it works is that each cells grow into different form based on the food they get. So this is something we provides food specific to the neurons, and that developed into nerve cells. If we give food that is specific to the heart cells, it developed into heart cells. So our main objective here is to make these blood cells or the skin cells grow into nerve cells and the blood cells to see how the chronic mountain sickness, because the symptoms in chronic mountain sickness patients are headache, nausea, cyanosis, thick blood, and all those things. So since we cannot do any study using we cannot get the brains or nerve samples from these populations, we reprogram these skin cells into nerve cells. So this is one of the video I would like to share with you, where we have reprogrammed the skin cells into heart cells, and you could see the cells beating. It has become a heart cells, and if you could see carefully, you could see the beating. So it's really amazing, because at one point you can take a skin cells, reprogram it, make it in a lung cell, and give it back to the patient if he needs a lung transplant or a lung cells. So this is how the stem cell works. I'm sure some of you might be working in this field in future, but this is something hospitals in US have already started using in treating different rare disease patients. So in conclusions, you would surely believe that Ladakh is one of the most diverse population based on Y chromosome, mitochondrial DNA, as well as autosomal DNA. So we know from our history that it has a multi-layered accumulations of demographic episodes like the nomadic migrations, seasonal pastoral movements, military campaigns, and immigrations. And then finally, that weed populations at high altitude have these signatures that shows that we are genetically adapted. I'm not talking in details what these could be applicable in terms of treatment, but the application is immense because the every disease that you talk about has low oxygen issues. Because if you talk about stroke, there's a low oxygen. If you talk about heart attack, there's a low oxygen. If you talk about immunity, there's a low oxygen issues. So if we know something from our DNA that shows that this, because of this, we are tolerant to low oxygen, there is a future prospect of developing medicine to all different kind of diseases. So finally, I would like to thank all the organizer and the audience for having so much patience. And then if you have any question, please feel free to ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stobdan. It was a very insightful session. If there is any questions from the participants, please ask.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have to high altitude adaptation. We see number of the low blood pressure. What your take on it? Yes, there are environmental factors associated with it, but have you ever get an opportunity to study the gene level genetics of that particular problem?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because the moment you go to high altitude, the first thing that you experience
Yes.
is that your even the systemic pressure goes up. The first thing that you experience is that the pulmonary pressure goes up. Pulmonary pressure means the heart pumps blood to the lung side because you need more oxygen. So the circulation has to increase to get more oxygen from the lungs. So that is one of the first phenotypic reactions. And then your systemic pressure, which is the blood pressure that you were talking about, it also increases, specifically among the soldiers. There are studies, they have found that the systemic blood pressure increases over a period of time, but it doesn't stay high throughout. But it is interesting that it is low in the Kargil area, but there are different factors for that. Specifically, if you go towards higher side, towards Changtang area or even Leh area, there are more cases of people having higher blood pressure. Even there are studies in Tibetan population living in Bangalore and other low altitude area, they have high blood pressure. So the reason this could be because of certain genetic factor, because at high altitude, you tend to have more physical activities, you are more exposed to stressful conditions. So the genetic mechanism, the way it is set up, is to control the high blood pressures, just to keep you within the limit. But because now the lifestyle has changes, earlier, because from the nomadic or farming lifestyle, we have moved on to more sedentary lifestyle. We are sitting more in office and doing less physical activity. So people have started developing more on the higher blood pressure. But low blood pressure, I don't think there's any genetic studies that is being done specifically in terms of high altitude. because even if I look at the South American populations, they always complain of high pulmonary hypertensions, not low blood pressure. So this is something interesting. I don't have any specific answer for that. I've never worked on the low blood pressure part also, but definitely this is something other people can explore, because the genetic uh, data bank is growing. Even I think there are studies done from Kargil populations also, collected by, I think, National Geography. There was some projects way back in 2007, 8. Somebody was collecting DNA, so I'm sure they have DNA data. But to what extent this has been done in terms of blood pressure, I'm sorry, yeah, I really don't know.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mumtaz.
Any other questions?
Yes, one question. I was just curious, like, hello?
Hello.
Yeah. As you talked about high altitude adaptation, like, can this be an advantage for Ladakhis in sports, like particular, like in
Yeah,
sports?
that's yeah, for sure, yeah, because uh, it's there are different layers of adaptations. First layer is the genetic adaptations, which takes thousands of years, and then comes the epigenetic, which is post genetics, and this has to do more with how much training you are getting. So inherently, we have that potential, but how much training we do can be beneficial, given the fact that we are doing enough training. Like in one of the study I did on Ethiopian populations, uh, we sequenced the whole genome of Ethiopian population, and then we found out that one of the gene was involved in their adaptation to high altitude. And what we did was we knocked out, means we slightly reduced the level of that gene in mice, and then we exposed these mice to low oxygen. And we were really surprised to see that when we exposed these mice to low oxygen, they were doing perfectly fine. And when we also reduce the expression only in the heart, because otherwise when you reduce the expression, it is reduced throughout the body. But we also use the conditional knockouts, which means that you are reducing the expression only in certain tissues. So we reduce only in the heart, and we saw that the mice were really doing good. And from there we could hypothesize, or we could draw the conclusion that most of the long distance runners are from the Ethiopian sites. You have all the ultra marathon runners and all those things. So definitely genetic has some roles. So the other thing is that the way our body is shaped is you have a barrel shaped chest, which has a more oxygen expansion, so that you can breathe in more air for the same respiratory rate. So in that case, you have more oxygenation of blood and more energy production. So definitely there are different population having different genetic makeup, having different certain advantage of sports activity. But I'm not sure if we could identify any genetic at the moment, specifically that is related to sports. Because even in the sports also, you have certain genes that are involved in muscles activity, you have certain genes that are involved in oxygen binding, you have certain genes that are involved uh, in the energetics, like heart pumping, heart movement, and all those things. So there are so many layers of adaptation that has to take place. But definitely, based on Ethiopian study, I do believe that we should have some kind of advantage in the sports.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Julie, I'm Sonam Rulkar. Kale, I have a question, like it's a general question. So I am right now pursuing direct PhD. So it's my like I just started this month. So I just wanted
Congratulations.
to know how is your research journey? Like how to keep motivated, how to work on a problem, how to search like how to pick up a problem, and then another thing is like with time the maybe my research does not seem suitable, so I just want to know how to look whether my problem is relevant or not, and then this.
That's it.
Yes, sir,
Hello.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. So I really appreciate your bringing these questions to this audience, but I will not take much time because this is more, I think, technical sessions. But you are all most welcome to contact me on my email. But just to give you a brief background, I did struggle a lot because I was the older brother in the family, and I did initially cleared my KAS prelims, but I didn't go for the mains because I'm sure the clearing any civil service is not so easy. So I didn't want to take any chances. And then the other thing is that uh, uh, coming to your topic, how hot the topic that you're working on is. Even when I started, I never thought high altitude is a really fascinating field. I had my own hypothesis about the adaptation and all those things based on what you read. So at some point, uh, the only thing that matters is what kind of technique that you know more. Like if I'm working on the genome, how much DNA sequence analysis I know, what kind of model system I know how to work on. So these things matter a lot because once you know these, like if you're working on mouse, you should know how to knock out, knock in, even maintain a colony, and do immunohistochemistry. And if you're working on a fly, you should know fly genetics. So once you know all these techniques, the hypothesis you can always build and use this technique, and your journey will be, very easy because everything that you struggle is related to learning techniques. Once you know this technique, building a hypothesis comes probably in a year or two, because first two few years of your PhD is learning what techniques are there in the lab, what new techniques are coming in the market or in the scientific field that you're in. And so this is really critical for me, at least, because right now I am used to working on everything from flies to cell to stem cells to human DNA, genome, even bioinformatics also. So this really comes handy when you finally sit down and decide on certain hypothesis. Coming to your hypothesis, that part, even your PI will not know where it could lead to. So, at least if you're joining right now, I mean, last month or this year, it's better you join a good lab with a good track record, and then try to learn as many technique as possible. So eventually you see certain questions that are not answered, you can pick those and then use all the techniques that you know, and try to address the issues. So that's something more relevant at this time, at least during your initial stage of PhD. But you're most welcome to email me or contact me on my phone or WhatsApp.
Okay, sir, thank you.
I hope I answered your questions.
Julie Kale,
Hello, sir. Two quick
am I
questions from my
am
side,
I
please.
audible?
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am, you go ahead, please.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, so Jule Kale, I am a student of BSc Honors Zoology. So I had a question regarding the thing about high altitude adaptation, right? So we know that environment does induce changes in the gene expression, like turning
Yeah.
it off and on, right? So I wanted to ask, imagine putting a situation if two parents they have a kid and then that kid is born and brought up in a lower altitude, somewhere like in a different area for like almost 20-25 years, and that kid happened to come back to Ladakh, would
Yeah.
that kid still have would that gene be still expressed, or would there be that influence of environment and that gene won't be expressed anymore?
Yeah, that question is quite relevant to me because both of my sons are born here. So I'll be closely monitoring once we visit home, probably next year. But definitely there are studies done in South America where they have studied both child born at high altitude and grown up at low altitude, as well as parents from high altitude. The child was born at low altitude and took them to the higher altitude, but it all depends on at what age you are taking them to high altitude. So the adaptations, because especially South American population, they have a history of just 20,000 to 25,000 years old. So their genetic makeup is quite, I mean, new in terms of high altitude. That's why the mountain sickness is very much prevalent in the Indian population. On the other hand, we on the Tibetan Plateau, including Ladakh, we have a long history of genetic adaptations. So our red blood cell count is almost equal to the people living at low altitude. On the other hand, the Indian population will have higher red blood cells. Similarly, Tibetan population in general have a higher respiratory rate that has its own advantage. But coming back to your question, whether a child born at low altitude will have a higher, same adaptation as the parents who were born and brought up in Leh or high altitude. Definitely, when you compare a child born at low altitude with another person with an ancestry of low altitude, born in low altitude, definitely because the genetic has a very strong effect, and epigenetic comes next. So definitely there are studies even in the Indian population where the child born at low altitude perform better when they visit back to the high altitude.
Okay, thank you, Kala.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Yes. Yes. First of all, that was a very great and interesting talk, Ale.
Thank you so
And
much.
I just have two questions. Number first is that you showed us the hematocrit levels of the
Yeah.
populations of high altitude, and it that seemed quite counterintuitive to me, in a sense that the population residing in high altitude areas, the adaptation
Mm.
should be in the form of raised RBCs and raised hematocrit, as we
Yeah.
understand that hypoxia induces the
Yeah.
production of more RBCs. Then
Yeah.
doesn't the hematocrit should be on the higher side?
Yeah.
So the adaptation should the would then I mean, as I understand it, that should then that means the carrying capacity, oxygen carrying capacity, would be higher. Is there something like that, sir, or
Yes.
am I missing something?
Yeah. That's the main point. Although this is the fundamental question that always keeps on coming back, why people at the Tibetan Plateau have a lower hematocrit. The reason is that uh, once you react to low oxygen, you tend to respond in so many ways. So high red blood count is one factor. So the on the other hand, when you have really high hemoglobin or hematocrit, your blood becomes really thick, and that leads you to have strokes and cardiac ischemia and all those things. So in the Tibetan population, there is an inherent mechanism that have stopped us being a part of the broader Tibetan populations that restrict the higher production of red blood cells, giving us the advantage that blood is thinner. On the other hand, our respiratory rate in general is higher. So and there is another caveat to this. So Indian population, on the other hand, will have higher hematocrit, but they have a very high percentage of chronic mountain sickness because the blood is very thick. It's very viscous. But in the Tibetan populations, also up to 3,500 to 4,000 meter, the hematocrit level remains low. The moment you have the altitude of residence 4,000 and above, then the hematocrit shoots up, even in the Tibetan populations. So if you go to Korzok area, which is around 4,600 meter, you will find a lot of people with high hematocrit. And there the average itself is around 18 to 20, which is on the higher side. And you have almost like 10-15% of chronic mountain sickness with red cheeks, blue cyanosis lips. But genetically, we are protected from those kind of illnesses, and we don't know what lead us to that protection. So that's something people are still exploring. But definitely, that's a very relevant question.
Right, sir. Sir, sorry to the other participants. Can I just have one more question regarding this out of Africa theory?
Yeah.
It's generally said that many of the Homo sapiens have some percentage of Neanderthal genes in them still. So,
Yeah.
but my understanding is that the Neanderthals, they existed towards the European side and the West Asian side. Probably they never migrated to this side. I mean, towards the Asian side. But as you have clarified that this site, the Denisovans, that was also one of the archaic humans, that they were residing in those areas. So that means that if we do the genetic study of the present day humans in our area, is it a chance that some of the genetic material that should come from Denisovans, some of the percentage, is it a possibility?
That is definitely, yeah, because Denisovan was widely distributed throughout Asia. And as you know, only in 2010 they discovered the first bone from Denisovan caves. So people are, as we are moving on, people are getting more fossils records from these areas. So Denisovan has their genetic mixture in Tibetan Plateau and all over South Asia. So definitely Ladakh will have some part of Denisovan gene in it.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So Danley, I have a question. Sorry, I just got disconnected. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much. That was a very insightful talk. And of course, that I think is probably the cutting edge when it comes to the genetics of Ladakh. So one thing I was wondering was that you showed in that principal component analysis, the Y chromosome, those 200 males that you sample. I don't know where they're coming from, but I'm just wondering, you know, would it be, and then you also showed the female mitochondrial DNA analysis also. Would it be right to say that the genetic diversity of the males is less than the genetic diversity of the females in the population of Ladakh? Is that
No,
from this?
yeah. So let me, sorry for the audience. I'll quickly explain. I think this is something really interesting. So share this. Can you see my slide?
Yes, yes.
Okay, just a moment. So okay, just a second. I cannot see my own slide. So yeah, here, what you see here is the male population LAD. This is the whole 200 individual in one dot. while on the mitochondria, each label is one individual. So when you say principal component analysis, it is a combination of all 200 individuals. Yeah, again, there is a confusion. Definitely, I'm sorry to I didn't clarify that. The way it is being analyzed is totally different. The principal component analysis give you a spatial distribution relative to other populations. Here you could see Japanese, Tibetan, and then you have Malaysia, Vietnamese in the blue circle. And then you have here all the other Central Asians and I think South Asian population, including Punjabi, Gujarati, Kyrgyz, and all in the green circle. And in the lower one, you have Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and then some Russian populations. So each dot represent an entire populations. Based on this, what you could see is that Ladakh has proximity to all different population, which means that's why it is somewhere in the middle. So it actually means that it has all different kind of ingredients. Similarly, in the mitochondria also, because this is a branched network type of presentation, and each circle is one Ladakhi female individuals. So both are different type of analysis, but both represent that Ladakh constitute all the haplogroups from different major populations.
Yeah, but suppose if we also analyze this in a principal component analysis, would you think that the Ladakh population would again stand apart based on mitochondrial DNA?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what it is. If you look at this table, color. If you look at this table, mostly you see the West Asia has 67 of group 4. Rest are all very, very minimum. But if you look at Ladakhi, we have like 4 or 5 in this group 2, 2, 3 in group 3, again 3, 4 individuals in group 5, and likewise. So even with these, I think this is around 39 subjects they have taken, and these 39 is distributed in all different 6 groups. So which indicates that again, if you plot this on a principal component, it will again occupy some position somewhere in the middle.
Right. Okay, thanks. My other question, I have quite a few actually, so I'll just send you an email. But my other question is regarding the hypoxia that you talked about. I mean, obviously, that's a major stressor in the high altitude areas. But are there studies that looked at animals' metabolism? You know, is there more cases of anaerobic metabolism in higher altitudes more than in other areas, for example?
Definitely, Karl. Maybe it might interest you also, because one of the analyses they did was they used the whole genome sequence of snow leopard and compared with all different cats family, and they have found really interesting result in terms of their habitat living at high altitude. And one of the other thing that people do look is the anaerobic respirations that is more efficient in these hypoxia adapted population. So that's something even we did in flies also. We have, as I mentioned in my previous talk, we have flies that we were growing for last 15 years, and now they are living in 4% oxygen. And we have analyzed the whole genome of these flies, and we know that their anaerobic process is really strong. So definitely there are a lot of studies, including, as I mentioned, snow leopard as well as Tibetan mastiff, not Tibetan mastiff, the Tibetan antelope. And yak is already sequenced and compared with other cow family. So during the 2010 to 2020 was the golden era for high altitude research, because everyone was sequencing the whole genome of all the living species at high altitude and comparing with other populations. So definitely there are studies, and I can send you the literature.
Very interesting. Yeah. So my last questions, those the two alleles that you talk about, the T allele and the A allele, what do they express? These alleles. So what?
Yeah, that's something definitely interesting. So this is an association study. So there's nothing that you could really conclude from this one allele change, but you could only say that this is a marker that shows that this individual is more tolerant. But how they are doing is not possible to predict. But the gene itself is involved in the hypoxia signaling pathway, where when you have this EGLN1, it actually stabilizes HIF factor and then leading to different hypoxia response, including vascular endothelial growth factor and so many other things. So this is one of the core genes that is involved in hypoxia regulations. But as such, T and A allele doesn't show anything. It just shows an association that this particular individual can tolerate low oxygen better than other one having A.
Oh, I see. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kyle. I hope that's it,
Do
right?
we have any other questions?
I think, am I taking too much time? I'm sorry for the next
Yes.
speaker.
Okay, sir. Moving, I think we should move ahead. Moving ahead, I would like to invite Ms. Kunzes Dolma to speak on the topic of geothermal energy in Ladakh. Ms. Kunzes Dolma is from Kukshu village. She did her schooling from Moravian Mission School, Leh, BE Mechanical from Thapar University, Patiala, MSc in Sustainable Energy Engineering from Reykjavik University, Iceland, Diploma in Geothermal Utilization, United Nations University. She worked in Ladakh, Lerida Polytechnic, Leh. She was awarded the Outstanding Green Activist Jury Choice Award 2019, organized by Indian Federation of Green Energy. She was also awarded Women in Geothermal Wing Courageous Award by Geothermal Resource Council 2019 USA. She is the Energy Advisor of Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council Leh, and she is a member of Women Alliance Leh. So, welcome, Ms. Kunzes Dolma.
Thank you, Tundule. Thank you very much. Julie, to all of you, good morning to Stobdan, all the way from the US.
Thank you.
Good to see you again. And first of all, thanks to LSF for this science camp, and really congratulate you, the whole team, for this success. And I'm pretty sure this will set a stepping stone for all the other camps to come up. Kasabdarle, I'm really, really inspired to see you over here and to hear
Thank you,
that
Achale.
you are here as a student.
When I saw
Really,
your
that's so
name,
humble
I
of
just jumped on the opportunity.
you. Oh, really,
Thank
that's
you
so
very much,
humble
Achale.
of you. Okay, so I'll just share my slides. Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, great. Tundu, really long introduction about me. Thank you for that. And regarding that, two of the institutions, international institutions, the others, I think many of you already know. So many of the students have been inquiring about this GROW GTP program. It was earlier known as the United Nations University Geothermal Training Program, and last year it has changed under the aegis of UNESCO. So now it's called the UNESCO GROW GTP program. This is a geothermal training program, especially for the developing countries, sponsored fully by the Iceland government in order to develop capacity building in developing countries in geothermal. How can you be a part of it, or how can you attend this scholarship? Is you need to be working in the field of geothermal or have really good passion about geothermal development in your country. Then, if you complete the 6 months program and they find your participation satisfactory, you can also get the opportunity to be awarded full scholarship for master's program. And even after completing the master's program, you might get an opportunity for getting a PhD program, which normally is given to only one candidate from one country every year. So I was quite lucky, I would say, to get all the three scholarships continuously. And right now I'm in the first year of the PhD, and a participant was inquiring that she's really confused about her project. So I'm with you. I have the same problem right now. Even after a year, I'm still figuring out what am I doing in my PhD. So yeah, don't worry about it. Another organization that I'm attached with is WING, Women in Geothermal. The main vision of WING is to have gender equality especially in the geothermal sector. And the aim is to become, of course, a redundant like every other sector in terms of gender. But in India, I really am quite surprised that we really don't consider gender equality as a problem in any professional sectors. So currently, WING, it's headed like this. We have a global chair, which right now is the United States of America. Then we have global executives. We have a global team, under which we have country ambassadors. Then we have country teams and respective state members. So last year, I was quite lucky to have launched the WING India team as an ambassador. We have our mentor, Catherine Young, who is the director at National Renewable Energy Labs in the United States. Then we have few active members from ONGC, from BITS Pilani, from PDPU, Gujarat, and several other institutes. And one of our own local persons as team member, I'm really happy to have is Kang Awang Tinles, who is also the director of LSF. He has been working continuously to promote geothermal, especially in Ladakh, for more than 10 years. So coming back to geothermal energy, what it is, and yeah. Basically, we divide geothermal into three types based on its formations. One is geothermal heat pumps, which is also known as the ground source heat pumps. We have hydrothermal systems, and then we have the enhanced geothermal systems. Among these ground source heat pumps are the shallow type, which can go up to 10-15 meters below ground. Hydrothermal are the springs that you can see, for example, in Ladakh. We have Puga, we have Panamik, we have Demchok, we have Chumadang. And then there is another technology which is being explored a lot right now in the Western developed countries, like by the United States and a few European countries. That is the enhanced geothermal system, in which you really go deep. And when I say deep, it's below 4 to 5 kilometers, and then you try to trap the heat of the earth in order to produce electricity or district heating. Based on the temperatures of the water, we can have several usage of the geothermal energy. So we can have water at 10 degrees Celsius, and we can use water up till 370 degrees Celsius for several uses like fish farming, greenhouses, we have food processing, then of course we have for electricity generation. Now, why geothermal energy for India? Why is it so important for India when India has so much of other energy sources available, other cheap energy sources available? Let me tell you first by saying how many hot springs we have, geothermal hot springs, till now explored by the Geological Survey of India. There are more than 350 sites explored in the 1970s by Geological Survey of India. And here I would like to point out one thing to the researchers, in case anybody is interested in geothermal. They might have definitely gone through this report from the Geological Survey of India, where it shows that a person named Schlagentveit, he had compiled these geothermal hot springs in 1862. Now there's a correction over here to be done, that this person, or he was an engineer with the British Army, he was killed in 1854. So it is not possible that he could have done the compilation in 1862. So please be careful while doing any kind of a paperwork and publishing any kind of paper regarding, reviewed paper or anything. Right now, the scenario of geothermal use in India is only very limited to just taking bath or for biology, like we all have seen in case of Puga. Like we take amchis over there, and there you can see people soaking in the hot water for arthritis, etc. Same is the case with the rest of the India. So these are few pictures from 6 to 7 different states of India, ranging from Manikaran in Himachal Pradesh to uh, Maharashtra to Bihar and Sona, which is very near to Delhi, just an hour from Delhi. So everywhere I went, saw that there was very limited use of geothermal energy, and this energy was just being let go without any proper usage. So when I come back again to the question of why India needs to do geothermal energy, or in that case, I would see more of green efficient energy, is if you see this Sankey diagram, we see that in the year 2017, the energy flow from different resources could be seen in this diagram, and where it was used. For example, coal, oil, natural gas, onshore wind turbines, and solar, concentrated solar power or solar photovoltaics. Now, you might think that with all these gigawatt projects coming up in India, and these hydrogen technology and hydropowers, your renewable energy contribution might be getting bigger, and that your coal contribution might get reduced in the future years. But I was surprised when I saw a future forecast of 2042, where you can clearly see this brown color, which is the coal and the oil, getting wider and wider instead of going thinner. So this is a serious case of concern, especially for India, when we are talking about carbon neutral India. This is really a cause of concern, and it needs to be addressed. And the only way to address this is by utilizing and by pumping more money into research and development of really green and not only green, but green and efficient technologies. Um, Geothermal is one of them, and it's not just a theoretical technology, it's a proven technology. Uh, we need to do it in order to reduce this brown thickening line into more a greener line. We can't say that, okay, we are using electric cars where our source of electricity would not be a green energy source, but it would be, say, coal. So that doesn't make the end product a green product. One more thing that we as a country always forget is this nexus of energy, food, and gender. Why I'm pointing out this is because we living in such a high altitude area with such extreme temperature conditions, we know there's extreme food security issues more than any other person living in India. We face food shortages for 6 to 7 months, fresh food supplies for 6 to 7 months. And we know that in the coming next 1 or 2 months, we would not be seeing any of these green veggies or fresh foods in the market. and that we would be having to stand in lines for hours just to get a kilo of fresh vegetable, which is a serious issue to be considered. But we have taken it as a norm. We are not taking it as a serious issue right now. Now, how does energy play into this food security? Is a place like Ladakh, where we have like bountiful of solar energy. We can use that energy for external heating of our greenhouses. So we can have huge commercial greenhouses which can cater to the food need of this place. And we can totally be vegetable like dependency could be really reduced. How gender comes into this picture is, of course, like you might have seen, or you can see in your own family that if it's a gardening work, 90% of the time it's the female of the family member who is doing the work. So definitely, food, energy, and gender has a big issue, a big role to play. These pictures are examples of how geothermal energy is being used in order to solve energy security. Uh, the above two pictures are of greenhouse in Iceland, where you can really not grow anything outside. It's really a harsh climatic condition over there. So they use this geothermal energy in order to have food production and for example, Iceland's tomato production is met from their own greenhouses. They don't have to rely on imports. Um, then we have these famous Blue Lagoon over here, which is nothing but a remnant of discharge from the power plant, this geothermal power plant in Iceland. This has become a major tourist attraction right now. This is a binary power plant in El Salvador in Latin America. Now, bit about geothermal energy and Ladakh. So many of you are aware of the two famous sites, that is Chumathang Panamik and Puga in Ladakh. Other than this, we have one in Changlung, which is 10-15 kilometers from Panamik. And then another one we have Demchok, which is again in Nyoma area. These two are so in total we have 5 geothermal areas which are right now not used very much other than just for balneology. Except there is one demonstration project of heating, space heating in Chumatang. If you so tomorrow during the field trip, please make it sure that you go to this space heating area and visit the site. So why geothermal energy? Some few benefits I would like to mention is one of them is land footprint. No doubt geothermal energy has good environmental benefits because it has, for example, binary power plants, it has zero carbon dioxide emission because it's a closed loop system, so you are not exposing anything into the environment. Other than that, by land use, what you mean is how much of land you are using to produce certain megawatt or kilowatt of electricity. So here I'm taking per gigawatt of electricity installed. For example, for solar thermal, 1 gigawatt hour of solar plant if you're installing, you need for 3,500 meters square of land, whereas for same amount of geothermal energy, you just need less than 500 meters square of land. So you can see the proportion of land requirement, land footprint is really, really less. And in terms of solar, when you talk, you have this heat absorbency by the plates, which increases the temperature of the surrounding, which is not the case in case of geothermal. Then if you come to the monetary terms, the economic benefits, you can say that from a solar PV, which has just 20% capacity factor, We have a geothermal energy which has 90% capacity factor, and with the only comparison to geothermal right now is the huge hydro projects which have 80 to 85% capacity factors. So again, you're getting much higher electricity generation, which means, of course, much higher returns. Another advantage is that geothermal power plant is available for 90% of the time, 10% being whether it can be in maintenance or something. Whereas solar is available only when you have sun, of course. We have reduction in carbon emission due to the less dependency on diesel generator, and it is the only source of clean energy at the moment. So how we really can develop these geothermal systems in India? So first and foremost is, of course, targeting the educational institutions by spreading knowledge about how we can use geothermal energy. As per my experience, what I see is not many students, especially at graduate levels, are knowing what geothermal energy really is and how can we really benefit from it, because there are no courses right now in institutions in India. Few institutions are there which are trying to introduce geothermal energy as courses or side courses in the institutions. One of them is NIT Durgapur, one of them is BITS Pilani, one of them is Pandit Deendayal Petroleum University in Gujarat. We have to introduce ground source heat pumps in building regulations, especially in case of Ladakh, where we are using lots and lots of fossil fuels for heating in winter months. India really needs to do more research into enhanced geothermal systems if we really want not to depend on the Middle East for import of fossil fuels. Yes, we have to promote and develop geothermal tourism, which can be another big source of tourism for Ladakh. This can be done by developing the infrastructure around that area, making it, keeping it more clean, keeping it more visible, and then we have to make site-specific demonstration projects. So by site-specific, what I mean is not rest of the India has climate conditions like Ladakh, so they don't need much heating, but they need cold storage, they need air conditioning, so we can use whatever specific demonstration projects we can have according to the sites. In geothermal, the most expensive part, 40% of the capital and exploratory. We can provide grants for exploratory drilling, which is done right now in Latin America and Africa by World Bank. So this will reduce the cost a lot, and this will attract investors. Then in insurance of the exploratory drilling, because it's a very risky part, the most risky part of the geothermal exploration. So in case there are insurances, then companies will be more, ready to come over there and work. We do not have a policy framework for geothermal right now. It is in the process. It has been in the process for over the past 10 years, and this really needs to come forward in a fast way in order to develop the energy systems. Then, of course, we need more and more of capacity building, right? For example, right now in MNR itself, we really do not have any geothermal expert in MNR itself. So that makes it a big hindrance in order to develop these projects. So we can have knowledge sharing and capacity buildings from countries like Iceland, New Zealand, United States, and etc. In all, geothermal energy fulfills many of the sustainable development goals like gender equality, zero hunger, affordable and clean energy, which is the 7 energy access sustainable energy part. My personal learning from Iceland that I would like to share here is Iceland was really not the country it is right now. If we look back to 50 years, it was one of the poorest country in Europe. If you see other pictures of old Iceland, you would be like, okay, how you are going to live there? And when I was there, I was like, okay, I cannot live in this weather condition, because once you are out in the open air, you cannot stand there. It's just too windy. And there is a saying in Iceland that if you do not like the weather, just wait for 5 minutes, because every 5 minutes the weather changes. You have storms throughout the year. You have wind running from 40 kilometers per hour to 130 kilometers per hour. It's a really tough climate condition over there. But the revolution came when they started utilizing and really focusing and having strong policy in order to develop what they had, and that was geothermal energy. So they started tapping this pump energy, and slowly, with all the policies and reforms, they are right now the #1 country in terms of gender equality, in terms of good living conditions, and in terms of quality life. And from my experience over there, I see that any country can do it. It just needs some effort from everyone, not only from the administration, not only from the politicians, but from everyone. From be it from local people, like a person like me. So my contribution was that a small meeting with a person from ONGC took up a shape of developing a huge project, which right now has come up in the form of the ONGC LAHDC UT administration geothermal development program. So the MOU was signed in January 2021, and we were expecting that we have some kind of a drilling started by this year, but due to some logistic issues and clearances issues, maybe hopefully by next year we'll start something. So yeah, I would say that if you believe in in what you're doing, and if you're really passionate about what you're doing, it is like nothing is impossible. And this picture of Puga, it's a shed where one of my mentor, I could say, Mr. Dr. Ehsan, who used to stay here and develop this site. Keeps inspiring me that yes, we can do it. We can definitely develop this area, and we could be the first in India to do so. Not just for the namesake of doing it, but do it in a really responsible way, not disturbing the environment, taking consideration every social aspect and environmental aspects in and around this area. Once again, thank you to LSF, and thank you everyone over here. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. I mean,
Kunzesle.
hello.
Julie Kunzesle. Kunzesle, since you are a geothermal expert, I'm pleased to know that you are advising the local Autonomous Development Council on energy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And may we know this council, do they have a white paper or a policy to make the best use of the potential which we have, so that Ladakh can be self-reliant, self-sufficient in terms of energy?
Yes,
And
you mean in terms of energy or just geothermal energy?
Geothermal, since we have the potential, yeah? Geothermal energy. And so in the future, we can be self-reliant and self-sufficient in terms of energy. And from where the investment will come? Yeah, is it from the
So,
public or is it from the Ambani or Adani?
okay, regarding the development of the geothermal project right now that is going on in Puga, it is being done by Oil and Natural Gas Corporation of India at the moment. And what you asked about this geothermal policy framework is I am in my personal capacity right now in the process of formulating our energy policy, not only on geothermal, but all kind of renewable energy. So hopefully by the end of this year, I might be able to show you a draft of it. But I don't know if LHDC can separately adopt it or not, because we have to follow the policy of Ministry of Government of India, Ministry of New Renewable Energy. But still, we are in the process of formulating one draft energy policy.
Thank you, Kunzes.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am. I'm eager to know about the geothermal and its implication on hot water therapy. Here in Ladakh, we may know about the Chusan. So
Yes.
what is its purpose and its medical implication?
Do you mean implication, or do you mean that if we develop geothermal energy, would there be any side effects on it?
Therapy, hot water therapy.
Yeah.
Can you just throw some light on hot water therapy?
Yes. So we have been using geothermal as a hot water therapy, or we call it balneology, right? For more than, I think, since we remember, for more than 400 years or so in Ladakh. So this was what I meant when I said that in order to develop geothermal, we really need to consider social environmental aspects too, because if in any area, and not only about Ladakh, in any area, if you uh, overexploit the resource too much, you might end up drying that area. So we have to take everything in consideration. There is the thing called optimization. So we have to make optimization use of everything, so that we do not disturb anything. And especially in Puga area, it's a really ecologically sensitive area. So there shouldn't be we should protect that area. There shouldn't be noise level too much. There has to be a certain noise level so that the birds in the area are not disturbed, the animal is not disturbed, basically flora and fauna is not disturbed. And also because lots of people from many villages come in Puga or Panamik for these medicinal treatments. So this area shouldn't be disturbed. But in order to develop this area in a proper way, because right now what I saw was that there are no proper facilities in the area for even treatments. What the people do is they just go over there, make a pool with hands, and stay in the mud, which really doesn't look hygienic. But a better way would be to develop it in a way that the infrastructure is developed over that area, in and around the area, so that you can use it in a more hygienic way. And it would look also hygienic, and it will attract more people. Am I clear? Tashile.
Yeah.
Kunzes, as of now, you're in the process of developing a policy framework so that the council will have a clear vision where they want to see Ladakh as a whole in terms of renewable energy. And you also told that ONGC has already started a project.
Yep.
It means council not having a clear policy and ONGC making an intervention. Do you see some implication of this intervention? Because our government is not having a clear policy.
Yeah, no, I won't say there is a negative implication as long as we monitor, because this was the reason why the MOU signing took such a long time, because there were lots of changes being made in there. making sure that it's not too much in favor of ONGC, that it doesn't affect the environment too much. So we would be keeping a check on it time and again.
Kunzes, may we know at present, do we have a M&E framework so that we can closely monitor the progress of the project?
Do we have a
M&E framework, monitoring and evaluation framework, well-defined indicators?
Yeah, there
Still
is a
goals are
monitoring committee actually. There is a monitoring committee, and which consists of LHDC itself, a nominated person from LHDC or anyone. Whenever the project is going on, we have to be there, and they have to make sure that whatever they are doing, they inform us. Whatever they're getting, even like data or anything, any kind of data that they're doing or any kind of work that they're doing, they have to share it with LHDC. So without the help of or without the consent of LHDC, yeah, they cannot go ahead with the project.
How frequently LHDC monitor this project?
Right now, the project has not started on the field yet, but they are making it sure that whenever there's a review meeting or anything, it is they are always there.
Okay.
Thank you, Achi Kunzes for the wonderful lecture.
Look, if you don't mind, I just want to ask one very small question to you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Kunzes, has there been any environmental impact assessment of this ONGC project? And if there has been one, is there anything available is it in public domain that we can see? And what? And the second question is, you said that it takes very little land compared to the other renewable energy methods, wind and solar. What about water discharge from that area? And then you talked about the impact of geothermal energy projects on flora and fauna, like Puga area. It's a very important habitat for a species called the Brahminate ducks, which is a very significant and important species for this landscape. How about the discharge from the project affecting, birds and other species downstream?
Yes. So let me answer the first question regarding the ESIA, right?
Yeah.
So ONGC has to make it sure that they submit the ESIA first before they start drilling. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they are in the process of finalizing the ESIA. And before drilling, they have to share it with us. But again, there is a lacuna in the ESIA requirement from Government of India itself, actually, that it mentions that below 10 megawatt, any company doing any projects all over India, they don't need to submit any kind of a ESIA. But we still managed to have that in the MOU. So I'm hopeful that they'll submit some report over there. Secondly, in terms of land usage and the discharge that you mentioned regarding the environmental impacts of the discharge. So this is the power plant that they are planning to put is a binary power plant, which is a closed loop. So closed loop in layman's term means that whatever is out, it will go back into the ground. So they don't discharge it in the river or the stream. So the recharge is circular, basically. It's not flowing. It's not just coming out and then ending up. So binary power plants, you have your hot fluid coming up and then again going back into your reservoir. Then again, I would like to point out that one thing I'm really surprised in any part of India is that whenever a new technology comes, people start criticizing it without saying what are the benefits of that project. So, for example, this comparison of solar and geothermal, albeit hydro and geothermal, the land use is totally less. There is no carbon dioxide emission from binary power plant. And one surprising thing is why people are not questioning about all the thousands of acres of land being given in order to develop solar plants, especially when solar plants have really, really low capacity. They just have energy conversion of 20%, whereas geothermal has energy conversion of 90%. So it's a really serious issue that people should really look into the pros and cons of technologies before criticizing. But yes, again, as I said, in terms of environmental, the flora and fauna, again, if you ask for solar, if you ask whether they have any kind of a ESIA, I'm pretty sure they don't have. So maybe we should start asking for any kind of project. It's not only for energy related project. It's for any kind of infrastructure project too, be it for construction of a building, be it for construction of roads, or any kind of project. We have to ask like where are the ESI, you know? And I'm seeing Sudha is also here. Maybe he can shed some light on this. Like what we really want is we really want maybe through this through the medium of this seminar or conference, we can send a message that any kind of project, not only energy projects or not only geothermal or not only hydro, but any projects, be it building projects. Right now, we are seeing thousands and thousands of buildings coming up. Has anyone thought about what are the implications of all those concrete structures on the environment, which is very, very high compared to what a geothermal plant could have? So we really need to rethink our thoughts. We really need to have a different mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Like recently, we have been getting some road proposals and all, and these guys, mostly the people who conduct these environmental impact assessment. These guys are mostly from outside, and they have been telling us that since there is no tree around this place, it doesn't look like it's any. It will damage much the local environment. I mean, they have no understanding whatsoever of the local flora and fauna. Where do we have trees? Like we have trees mostly along the streams and rivers and all. That's about it. Where do we have trees? So having trees should not be the yardstick of for constructing something or doing something about it. So absolutely, I agree. And don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing. I'm just generally I'm curious.
Totally. No, it's a total misconception many people have actually. Not only in Ladakh, in many of the countries, I have seen that people have this same misconception that, oh, okay, geothermal, like what will happen, And the same thing is like when you say there are no trees, I would again say that many say that, okay, Ladakh has so huge amount of barren lands. It's not about barren lands, actually. We live in a very fragile ecosystem. We are amongst the third pole area. So our environment plays a huge role in the balance of these climatic conditions in these Tibeto areas. And if like I don't know, maybe this might sound crazy to many of you, but I'll be fair here that if an environmental impact assessment is done on these gigawatt projects, which are told to be coming up in Changtang area, I'm definitely sure that that project will have a straight away no, because that huge amount of thousands and acres of land is going to create a huge disturbance in the whole pressure system of that area. And that is going to affect not only Ladakh, but the whole monsoon season of India. So, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Or everyone fell asleep?
I think, yeah, it's done. Thank you, Ms. Kunzes Dolma. Yeah, we are getting shortage of time. So coming towards the end of today's program, I would like to call upon the member secretary of the organizing committee, Shri Rixon Sewang, for giving the vote of thanks.
Yeah, I think he is not able to join. He's occupied with some other activities. So I will wind up. Ya, tene sangmala jule slam tene tujece diri ka sketches pa khas kar ngata ika diri speaker engis tene Dr. Tsering Stobdan le nang Kunzes Dolma le ngizang iske ma demo jate presentation cho jat ma technical ma depth na song ma